The year is 2008. The month is May. A man named Arthur Sterling sits in a glass-walled boardroom, 27th floor, downtown. The table is polished obsidian. It reflects the grim faces of the other board members. Sterling is the chief risk officer for Agribank Financial. He is 62 years old. He has seen everything, or so he thought. In front of him is a preliminary damage assessment, 5 pages, stapled at the corner. He reads the numbers. He reads them again. They do not change. $17 million in irrigation equipment, gone, submerged or washed away. $22 million in processing facilities, a total loss. The concrete pads they were built on are now riverbed. Projected crop loss for the quarter, $40 million, minimum. The numbers are catastrophic. They are not, however, what makes him pause. He flips to the 3rd page, a satellite image, taken yesterday. It shows the entire valley, 3,000 acres of Agribank land. All of it is a uniform, muddy brown. The color of ruin. Except for one spot, a perfect rectangle of green, an island. 160 acres, untouched. A note is appended to the photo. Property of Alara Vance, refused all acquisition offers, 1985. Sterling stares at the green rectangle. He feels a cold knot tighten in his stomach. It's not possible. The flood models were perfect. The hydrological surveys were state-of-the-art. The engineers had guaranteed the floodplain mitigation. They had built for a 100-year flood. This was a 100-year flood. So why was she green? Why was her farm dry? Sterling picks up the phone. He dials an internal number. It rings twice. A voice answers. Records department. He speaks, his voice low. I need the Vance file, from the mid-80s, the original acquisition attempt. Yes, sir. Right away. He hangs up. The room is silent. The other board members are watching him, waiting for an explanation he does not have. 30 years ago, a man from this very bank sat at Alara Vance's kitchen table. He told her she could not possibly succeed. He told her she should sell. He told her it was for her own good. He was kind. He was certain. And he was wrong. This is the story of how a quiet woman with dirt under her fingernails taught a multi-billion-dollar corporation a lesson it would never forget. A lesson about listening. A lesson about memory. A lesson about the soil itself. Because the dirt remembers. And what the bank forgot was about to cost them everything. This channel is built on stories like this. Stories of quiet persistence, of people who were told no, and who answered not with words, but with their lives. If you believe these stories need to be told, subscribe, join us. Because the story you are about to hear is more than just a story about a farm. It's about a type of strength that the modern world has forgotten, and we cannot afford to let it disappear. Let's go back to 1985, the year before the offers began. Alara Vance was 58 years old. She had been married to Samuel Vance for 40 of those years. They had worked this land together, this 160 acres. It was not the biggest farm in the valley. It was not the most profitable, but it was theirs. Every fence post, every furrow. It was a map of their lives. Samuel was a man of few words. He communicated with the earth. He kept journals. Not diaries, journals. Leather-bound books filled with numbers and observations. Rainfall totals going back to his grandfather's time. Soil temperature readings. Notes on the behavior of the creek at the north end of their property. Whisper Creek, they called it, because most of the year it was silent. A dry, stony bed of rock and sand. In Samuel's journals, it was not silent. It was a sleeping giant. He had charted its cycles. 1927. the year his father had to replant the entire North Field. 1948. The year the water came up to the porch of the old barn. 1963. A smaller flood, but it took out the bridge on the county road. The pattern was inconsistent, but it was undeniable. Every so often the water came back. He taught Alara how to read the signs, the way the deep well water tasted in late winter, the behavior of the birds in the cottonwoods that lined the creek bed, the subtle shift in the air on a summer evening. These were not superstitions. They were data points, collected over a century. Samuel would tap the page of an open journal. He would look at her. "The dirt remembers, Alara," he would say. "It never forgets." Then, in the spring of 1984, Samuel died. A heart attack while mending a fence line. He was there one moment, gone the next. Alara buried him on the small hill overlooking the North Field. She was alone. Her children were grown, living in cities far away. They begged her to sell. "Come live with us, Mom. You can't run that place by yourself." She refused. This was her home. This was Samuel's home. She learned to do it all. She fixed the tractor, a 1972 John Deere 4020. Samuel had taught her how. She managed the books. She planted the crops. She worked from sunrise to sunset. She was tired, but she was not broken. The farm became her purpose. It was a conversation with her husband that had not ended. Then the letters started arriving. AgriBank Financial, a large agricultural corporation from out of state. They were buying up land in the valley, thousands of acres. They had a new vision: industrial-scale farming, massive fields, automated systems, maximum efficiency. The letters were polite, impersonal, offering a fair market price. She threw them away. Then, one Tuesday afternoon in June of 1985, a car drove up her lane. A new sedan, shiny and black. It felt alien on the gravel drive. A man got out. He wore a gray suit. He had kind eyes and a firm handshake. His name was Frank Henderson. He was a vice president for AgriBank. He said he was just in the area. He wanted to put a face to the name. Alara invited him in. She was raised to be polite. They sat at the old oak table in her kitchen, the same table where she and Samuel had eaten 10,000 meals. She served him iced tea. He placed his briefcase on the floor beside him. He did not open it. Not yet. This was the moment, the pivot point, the quiet collision of two worlds. One measured in quarterly reports, the other measured in seasons. Frank Henderson was a good man. He coached his son's Little League team. He served on the board of his church. He believed in what his company was doing, bringing efficiency and modern science to farming, feeding the world. He looked at Alara Vance and felt a genuine sense of sympathy. A widow, alone on a farm that was clearly too much for her. The paint was peeling on the barn. The fence in the south pasture was sagging. He was not here to pressure her. He was here to help her. He was certain of this. He began by complimenting the tea. He talked about the weather. He admired the view from her kitchen window. He was patient. He was professional. Then he leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Vance, Alara, our offer is more than fair. In fact, it's 20% above the appraised value. It's a strong offer." Alara said nothing. She just watched him. He continued, "We're building something special in this valley, a state-of-the-art operation. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to be a model for the future of agriculture. Your property is right in the middle of our planned layout. It's a key piece." He paused. "I understand your connection to this place. I truly do. My own grandfather was a farmer. But this is a chance for a new chapter, a chance to rest. You've earned it. No more fixing tractors in the dead of winter. No more worrying about rain. You could travel, see your grandchildren. His voice was smooth, reasonable, persuasive. Ilara took a slow sip of her tea. She set the glass down. The condensation made a perfect ring on the wood. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "this land is not for sale." Her voice was not angry. It was not defensive. It was a simple statement of fact, like saying the sky is blue. Frank Henderson felt a wave of frustration. Not at her, at the situation. He couldn't understand why she wouldn't accept this gift, this lifeline. He opened his mouth to argue, to explain the numbers again, but Ilara spoke first. "You're planning to build your sorting facility near Whisper Creek." She said it as a statement, not a question. Henderson was surprised. "Yes. The land is flat there, perfect for the foundation, easy access to the main road." "How did you know?" She didn't answer his question. Instead, she asked one of her own. "Did your surveyors check the flood records?" "Not the county records, the old ones." Henderson smiled, a kind, reassuring smile. "Mrs. Vance, we've spent millions on geological and hydrological surveys. Our engineers are the best in the business. They've modeled every possible weather event. That creek bed has been dry for 22 years. It's not a threat." Ilara stood up. She walked to a bookshelf in the corner of the kitchen. She pulled down a thick, leather-bound volume. She placed it on the table. She opened it. The pages were filled with elegant, faded handwriting, dates, numbers, drawings. "This is my husband's grandfather's journal." She turned a page. "Here, 1898. The creek took the old smokehouse." She turned another page. "And here, 1927. Water 4 feet deep in the north field." She looked up at him. "That creek doesn't sleep forever, Mr. Henderson. It wakes up. And when it does, it takes what's in its way. The dirt remembers." Frank Henderson looked at the old book. He looked at the earnest woman across from him, and he felt pity. She was clinging to the past, to old stories. He felt a duty to save her from herself. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice soft with compassion, "I appreciate you sharing this with me. It's a wonderful piece of family history. But we have science now. We have computers. We can't make a multi-million-dollar business decision based on—" He trailed off. He didn't want to say old farmer's tales. Ilara closed the book. The sound was soft, final. "I'm not asking you to make a decision," she said. "I'm telling you, you are building on borrowed time." Henderson sighed. He had failed. He stood up. He left his business card on the table. "Well, we can't force you to sell. We'll have to build around you. The offer stands, Ilara, for 1 year. When you find this is too much for you, please call me. I genuinely hope you'll be all right." He thought he was being kind. He believed he was doing the right thing. That certainty, that gentle, well-intentioned certainty. It was more insulting than any threat. It was a quiet declaration that her knowledge meant nothing, that her life's experience was worthless. Have you ever been told you can't do something? Not by an enemy, but by a friend? By someone who truly believes they are protecting you. It's a strange kind of fight. You can't answer with anger. You can only answer with your work, with the passing of decades. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time you had to prove someone wrong who thought they were helping you. Because what Ilara did next wasn't about anger. It was about honor. honoring her husband, honoring the land, and honoring the truth that only she seemed to know. After Henderson's car disappeared down the lane, Ilara stood at her window. She watched the dust settle. She was not angry. She was something else. A cold, clear resolve. He had looked at her husband's life's work, a century of careful observation, and called it family history. He had dismissed it, kindly, politely, completely. That night she didn't sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with all 7 of Samuel's journals. She spread them open. She read. She was not just reading about the weather. She was reading about resilience. Her great-grandfather-in-law had built a levee after the 1898 flood. He built it with mules and a drag pan. It was a simple earthen berm, 10 feet high, running the entire length of the creek on their property, for a quarter of a mile. Samuel's father had reinforced it in 1930, using their first tractor, a Fordson Model F. Samuel himself had planted the stand of black willow trees along its base in the 1950s. Their deep, fibrous roots were a living net, holding the soil together. The levee was still there, overgrown with grass and wildflowers. Most people wouldn't even know what it was. It just looked like a long, low hill. But Ilara knew. It was a shield. The next morning she started work. She took a scythe to the weeds on the levee. She worked all day. Her back ached, her hands blistered. She kept working. The next week, Agribank's machines arrived. They swarmed the valley. Massive earth movers, fleets of tractors bigger than her barn. The sound was constant. A low roar from dawn till dusk. They tore up the old family farms, ripped out the fence lines, leveled the gentle hills. They were creating a blank canvas, a vast, featureless plain of dirt. Her neighbors watched, some with sadness, some with envy for the checks they had cashed. Tom Haskins, her neighbor to the west, stopped by. He was in his 70s. His family had farmed here for 4 generations. He had sold. He sat with her on her porch. He looked out at the machines. "They sound like angry insects," he said. Ilara nodded. He looked at her. "You're really going to stay?" "I am." He shook his head. "I don't know, Ilara. It's a new world. Maybe it's time to let go." She didn't argue. She just said, "Samuel wouldn't have." Tom sighed. No, he wouldn't have. He stood up to leave. He paused at the steps. "If you need a hand, you call me. Don't you hesitate." He was an ally, the first one. Over the next year, the Agribank facility rose from the dust, a massive complex of steel and concrete. It was built exactly where Ilara said it shouldn't be, less than 200 yards from the bank of Whisper Creek. She watched them pour the foundation. She watched them raise the walls. She never said a word to them. She just worked. She spent her savings, not on a new tractor, not on a new roof. She bought drainage tile, hundreds of feet of it. She rented a backhoe. Tom Haskins' son, a man named David who had stayed to work for Agribank, came on a Sunday, his day off. He didn't ask why. He just operated the machine. For 10 hours, he dug a trench at the base of the old levee, on her side. He laid the tile for her, a secondary defense, to channel away any water that might seep through. Ilara fed him lunch. He wouldn't take any money. "My dad told me to," was all he said. When the tile was in, she planted more trees, not just willows, cottonwoods and silver maples, trees that drank water, trees that held the earth. The people at the co-op in town thought she was crazy, spending good money on a dry creek, planting trees where she could be planting cash crops. They whispered about her. Poor Ilara. She's not thinking straight since Samuel passed. She heard the whispers. She ignored them. She was not operating on speculation. She was operating on data. 150 years of it, written in ink on brittle paper. The construction finished in late 1986. The Agribank signs went up. Proud, white and green. They surrounded her farm, a tiny island of tradition in a sea of corporate agriculture. Her 160 acres against their 3,000. The odds were not in her favor. But Ilara wasn't betting on odds. She was betting on memory, the memory of the dirt. And she had a secret weapon. The journals were not just about floods. They were about farming, about how to get the most out of this specific soil, in this specific valley, with minimal cost. Agribank had computers and satellites. Ilara had Samuel's handwriting. The fight was just beginning, and it wouldn't be fought with anger or lawyers. It would be fought with bushels per acre. This is where the story turns. It becomes a quiet 20-year war, fought across a fence line. On one side, Agribank, 3,000 acres, millions in capital, the latest chemical fertilizers, the newest hybrid seeds, massive articulated tractors with GPS guidance. Their goal was simple: maximum yield, at any cost. On the other side, Ilara Vance, 160 acres, a 40-year-old tractor, and Samuel's journals. Her goal was different: maximum health, the health of the soil. Because the journals taught one primary lesson: healthy soil produces healthy crops, year after year, without expensive inputs. So she began. 1987, Agribank planted corn, wall to wall, a monoculture. They sprayed for weeds, they sprayed for pests. Their balance sheet showed a massive expense line for chemicals. Ilara, following Samuel's notes from the 1950s, planted her corn in rotation, next to fields of alfalfa and clover. The legumes acted as a natural fertilizer, fixing nitrogen in the soil. She didn't need to buy it from a chemical company. Her input cost was a few bags of seed, cash. At the end of the year, Agribank's yield per acre was slightly higher, 10%. They celebrated in a boardroom, but their profit per acre was 30% lower than hers. The cost of their chemicals and machinery ate their advantage. Contrast math. It was the first sign. No one noticed but her. 1988, a dry year. Agribank's massive fields were thirsty. They installed a center pivot irrigation system, dozens of them, drawing millions of gallons of water from the deep aquifer. The cost was astronomical. Ilara consulted the journals. Samuel had practiced something he called soil moisture banking. He tilled in a specific way, leaving crop residue on the surface, creating a mulch that prevented evaporation. Her fields stayed green longer. She didn't have an irrigation system. She didn't need one. Her yield was lower that year, but she still made a profit. Agribank, after the cost of their new system, posted a loss for the Valley Division. They explained it away as a capital investment, an anomaly. Frank Henderson, in his distant office, saw the report. He saw the small profit number from the independent farm in the center of their operation. He felt a flicker of something, not worry, curiosity. He dismissed it. She got lucky with a few timely rains, that's all. The years rolled on, a quiet rhythm. 1990. Ilara planted strips of wildflowers between her crop rows. The old men at the co-op laughed, wasting good land on weeds. But the flowers attracted beneficial insects, pollinators and predators. Ladybugs that ate the aphids, wasps that parasitized the corn borers. She didn't need to buy pesticides. Cash. Her crops thrived. 1994. Agribank had a problem with soil compaction. Their huge, heavy machines were crushing the life out of the dirt. Water couldn't penetrate. Roots struggled. They had to buy subsoilers, massive plows to rip the compacted layers, more fuel, more expense. Ilara's soil was light and airy. Her old, smaller tractor didn't crush the ground. Years of organic matter had created a rich, dark loam. It held water like a sponge. The community was divided now. The whispers had changed. The laughter had stopped. Younger farmers, struggling with debt, started watching her. They saw her old equipment. They saw her clean fields. They saw her loading her crops at the grain elevator. And they saw her truck was paid for. David Haskins, the man who had dug her trench, now managed the Agribank operation. He was a company man, but he had eyes. He saw her profits in the co-op reports. He saw the health of her soil when he drove past. He started asking questions, quietly. He would stop by Ilara's place, ostensibly to talk about the weather, but he was watching, learning. 2001, a wet spring. Whisper Creek rose, not a flood, just a warning. The water came up to the edge of the concrete pad of Agribank's facility. It stayed there for a week. The managers in the corporate office were nervous. David Haskins filed a report. He recommended a feasibility study for reinforcing the creek bank. The request was denied. Too expensive. An unnecessary precaution. The models said it was fine. That year, Frank Henderson retired. On his last day, he drove out to the valley. He had not been there in years. The scale of the operation was breathtaking, a testament to his vision. Then he saw her farm, the Vance place, a quilt of green and gold. The willows she had planted were tall and thick. The old levee was a gentle green rampart. Her farm looked permanent, rooted. His massive, modern facility looked temporary, brittle. He felt that same flicker again, stronger this time. Something he couldn't quite name. It felt like doubt. He drove away and never came back. 7 more years passed, 7 more years of Ilara following the wisdom in the journals, 7 more years of Agribank following the logic of their spreadsheets. Then came the winter of 2007. The snow was heavy, the ground froze deep. Ilara read the signs. The taste of the well water had changed, a subtle mineral tang. Samuel had written about it, a sign of immense pressure in the deep aquifer. The spring of 2008 was warm and wet. The snow melted fast. The rains came. Not a storm, just a steady, relentless downpour. For 3 weeks. The ground was saturated. The water had nowhere to go. Ilara walked the levee every day. She watched the creek bed. It was no longer silent. A trickle became a stream. A stream became a river. The roar started. The one Samuel had described, the sound of a giant waking up. She was ready. On the night of May 14th, 2008, the water came. It was not a gentle rising. It was a wall. A muddy, churning wave of brown water, logs, and debris. It surged out of the narrow upper canyon and hit the wide, flat valley floor. The floor that Agribank had so carefully leveled. The creek, which had been a 50-foot-wide channel, became a mile-wide torrent. It ignored the path it had followed for 30 years. It went back to its old path. The one from 1898. The one from 1927. The one recorded in Samuel's journals. The path that ran directly through the Agribank processing facility. The first thing to go was the fleet of tractors, parked in neat rows. The water lifted them like toys, tossed them downstream. The processing facility held on for an hour. Then the foundation, sitting on saturated, unstable ground, gave way. A corner of the building slumped. Then the whole structure twisted. The sound of groaning, shearing metal carried for miles. It collapsed into the flood. David Haskins and his crew could only watch from high ground. They were helpless. Everything they had built, everything they managed, washed away in a single night. At her farm, Ilara stood on her porch. She could hear the roar. She could feel the vibration in the floorboards. The water slammed into her great-grandfather's levee. The earthen wall shuddered. It held. The black willows, their roots woven deep, dissipated the wave's energy. They bent but did not break. Water seeped through, as Samuel knew it would. But the drainage tile at the base of the levee captured it, channeled it away safely to the lower south field. By morning, the rain had stopped. The water began to recede. The valley was unrecognizable, a landscape of mud and ruin, except for her farm, her 160 acres. It was wet, it was muddy at the edges, but it was intact. It was green, an island. 2 days later, a car drove up her lane. An old Buick, not a company car. An old man got out. His shoulders were slumped. His face was lined with a deep regret. It was Frank Henderson. He had heard the news. He had to see it for himself. Ilara was on her porch. She watched him approach. He stopped at the bottom of the steps. He looked past her, at the devastation beyond her property line. Then he looked at her. He didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he spoke. His voice was hoarse. "You told me," he said. "You told me, and I didn't listen." Ilara didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't gloat. She just nodded. He looked at her, his eyes pleading for some kind of understanding. "The engineers, the models, the science," he stammered. "It was all supposed to be so certain." Ilara looked at him. Her expression was not triumphant. It was weary. "The dirt remembers, Mr. Henderson," she said softly. "Your science is new. The dirt is old." She gestured to the open door of her house. On the kitchen table, the journals were laid open. She had been reading them again. Henderson walked past her, into the house. He stood before the table. He looked down at the faded ink. At the century of data he had dismissed as family history. He reached out a trembling hand. He gently touched a page dated 1948, a hand-drawn map. It showed the flood line from that year. It was almost identical to the path the water had just taken. The information had been here, all along, in this room, on this table. He had been sitting right here, and he had been so certain, so sure of his own world. He couldn't see the truth of hers. He finally understood. His kindness had been a form of blindness. His certainty had been a weapon. He turned to Ilara. Tears were in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not for the money, for not listening, for thinking I knew what was best for you." Ilara Vance looked at the man who had, in his own way, been her antagonist for 23 years. She saw no enemy, just a man humbled by a truth he could no longer deny. Proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind is the loneliest fight there is. It brings no joy, only a quiet, heavy vindication. The reckoning was over, and it had been as quiet as the woman at its center. The story doesn't end there, because what happened next changed the valley forever. Agribank Financial declared bankruptcy for its regional division. They couldn't absorb the loss. It was too great. They walked away. Their 3,000 acres, now covered in silt and debris, went up for auction. The price was low. No one wanted to touch the ruined land. No one but Ilara. She didn't buy it all. She didn't want to. She bought the 200 acres bordering her property to the north, the land that contained the head of Whisper Creek. She paid cash. money she had saved over 2 decades of profitable, sensible farming. Then she did something unexpected. She started a foundation, the Samuel Vance Land Trust. She used her own money and the story of the flood to raise more. Young farmers, the ones who had been watching her for years, came to her. They didn't have the capital to buy land. The banks wouldn't lend to them. The Land Trust did. It bought up the old Agribank parcels, 100 acres at a time. It didn't sell the land to the young farmers, it leased it to them. Long-term, 99-year leases, for $1 a year. There were conditions. They had to farm it using the principles in Samuel's journals: no monocultures, crop rotation, no heavy chemicals. They had to work to restore the health of the soil that Agribank had damaged. They had to plant trees. They had to respect the creek. It was a new model, not based on ownership, based on stewardship. The valley began to heal. The vast, empty fields were broken up again. Fence lines reappeared. Different crops grew side by side. The soil came back to life. The valley became a patchwork quilt again. Ilara became a teacher, a mentor. Her kitchen table, once a place of confrontation, became a classroom. She taught the young farmers how to read the journals, how to read the land. She never raised her voice. She never gave a speech. She would just point to a line in Samuel's handwriting. "See," she would say, "he already figured this out for us. We just have to listen." The legacy was not one woman's victory over a corporation. It was the victory of a better idea, an idea of permanence, of resilience, of listening to the deep, slow wisdom of the earth. Agribank had tried to impose a new story on the valley, a story of data and efficiency. But Ilara Vance had preserved the old story, the true story. And in the end, the true story always wins. She lived to be 94 years old. She passed away in the same house she was born in. She was buried next to Samuel on the hill overlooking the north field. From that hill, you can see the whole valley. You can see a dozen small, thriving farms. You can see the healthy, vibrant land. You can see the black willows lining the creek. You can see the legacy. Today, if you visit the county's agricultural museum, there's a new exhibit. It's in a quiet corner, behind a pane of glass. It's a simple oak table. On the table, a single leather-bound book is open. It is one of Samuel Vance's journals. The page is open to the hand-drawn map of the 1948 flood. Next to it is a satellite image of the 2008 flood. The lines are nearly identical. Sometimes a young farmer will bring their child to the museum. They will stand before the glass case. The parent will point. They will tell the story of the woman who listened, the story of the bank that didn't. They will touch the glass, as if the wisdom inside could be absorbed, the physical artifact, the proof. The dirt remembers. This story is about more than a flood. It's about two kinds of knowledge: the loud, confident knowledge of spreadsheets and projections, and the quiet, patient knowledge of observation and experience. One is powerful, the other is wise. Our world has become very good at being powerful. We have forgotten how to be wise. We have stopped listening to the Ilara Vances of the world. We dismiss their knowledge as family history, as anecdote, as irrelevant. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is sitting at a table. They are being told they can't. They are being told that their lived experience is no match for the expert's model. They are being offered a kind, certain, and devastatingly wrong version of the future. They are being told it is for their own good. This story is for them. It's a reminder that the oldest truths are the ones that last, that certainty is the most dangerous trap of all, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is to simply stay put, to do the work, and to trust what you know to be true, especially when the whole world is telling you you're wrong. If this story means something to you, if it reminds you of someone in your own life who stood their ground against well-meaning certainty, share it. These are the stories that give us strength.
The stories that teach us how to endure.
Subscribe for more stories of quiet rebellion and earned triumph. And comment below, what is the dirt in your life? What is the fundamental truth you hold on to that you will not let go of? Thank you for listening.